First though tonight, it's the story of the HPV vaccine. It's a vaccine against a killer, cervical cancer. And even if you survive cervical cancer, the side effects of the treatment can be horrendous. The vaccine is being offered to young teenage girls all over this country. So you might think that parents would grab it and grab such an opportunity to protect their children with both hands. But many haven't. The take-up of the vaccine is in fact falling. A campaign claiming that the vaccine has damaged some of those who got it is being blamed. But is there any justification for the scare, and might it cost lives? Rita O'Reilly now reports.
A vaccine that can prevent a cancer that kills up to 100 women here every year. It's a potential lifesaver, but its take-up in the school's immunisation programme has plummeted.
If we continue on the same trajectory, we're heading towards an uptake rate of under 50%.
Doctors are worried.
We are very concerned because we know that this is putting girls at risk.
What really annoys me is the fact that this is preventable, and this is a preventable disease.
A highly charged campaign across regional, national and social media is credited with the drop. It has left health authorities and eminent doctors at a loss.
Although we live as in a post-truth society, we are still sticking to the facts.
A parents group, Regret, believes that the HPV vaccine is behind a variety of illnesses in hundreds of teenage girls.
You're in a wheelchair, isn't that right?
Yeah, I can't really leave the house without it. I get too tired.
Before the jab, she was doing normal activities that you'd expect from a normal teenage girl, and since then that's just stopped.
The girls have severe fatigue, ovarian cysts.
I want this vaccine to be taken off the market.
In 2010, it was public pressure that led then Minister for Health Mary Harney to reverse a decision not to fund the HPV vaccine's rollout. Protecting against 7 out of 10 types of cervical cancer and some common types of the sexually transmitted HPV virus too, it was met with a chorus of approval. It's taken just 18 months to throw that into doubt.
I am concerned that it may be related to unsubstantiated concerns about the HPV vaccine safety raised by groups.
The group Regret declares its parents certain that the HPV vaccine Gardasil is the cause of their daughter's illness.
I'm one of the girls who reacted to the vaccine. I have 4 doctors treating me for vaccine injury.
Its potent claim that the HPV vaccine harms went viral when it challenged a scientist at an Irish Cancer Society meeting and then uploaded a video of it.
Do you feel guilty just for promoting this so more girls end up like me? In a wheelchair, not attending school.
By the end of August, it had over 1 million views on Facebook. A HSE video posted soon after has had just over 500. Regret lists a wide range of symptoms of what it calls extreme trauma after the vaccine.
I mean, a very common symptom would be severe daily headaches.
The Health Products Regulatory Authority records suspected adverse reactions to drugs in Ireland. Regret has its own list of several symptoms.
We get the reports in, we evaluate them, we then transfer them also into the European database. So we have a vast database to look for trends and signals. We have on our database 30 reports of seizure. Some of those girls have had a family history of epilepsy. Some of them have had epilepsy before they got the vaccine. Again, these have gone into the European database. They've been reviewed by the scientific committees, the safety committees at the European agency, and absolutely no evidence that the vaccine is causing these effects.
There are issues with muscle fatigue, memory and concentration problems, and neurological issues.
There have been 16 cases of chronic fatigue syndrome reported to us. Just 5 of those have been medically diagnosed.
If you take chronic fatigue syndrome, which has been known in the medical literature for over 200 years and is more common in young adolescents and particularly in girls, There are about 10,000 people in Ireland living with this syndrome. So we would expect to see this syndrome in girls who are vaccinated and also in other girls who are not vaccinated.
Anaphylaxis and severe allergic reactions are a known rare side effect of most vaccines. We have 9 reports. In some of these children, they had previous allergic reactions to other issues, and some of them had asthma, which would predispose to an allergic reaction.
The HPRA says it has had 1 report of premature ovarian failure and 1 of early onset of menopause, with no evidence that the vaccine was the cause.
Several groups, several girls with ovarian failure with these problems in the group.
And can you supply us with proof to show this?
I have to ask their parents.
4 weeks on, we're still waiting. Elsewhere in September, Miss Cannon put a figure on it.
But we have 6 girls now in the group who are in the age bracket of 16, and they have all been diagnosed with ovarian failure.
And last week, Regret claimed 13 girls were diagnosed with it. We asked it to back up that serious claim, but we've had no reply. In all, over 6 years, 660,000 doses and 220,000 girls vaccinated, the HPRA has received just over 1,000 suspected adverse drug reactions. The vast majority of them were short-lived. Of the 1,054, 700 are listed as resolved or recovered. They said they were mild and transient and consistent with what they would expect with all vaccines.
That does not mean the other 300 have not resolved. It could mean that we're still following up on that case report, or that we just cannot get the information.
Regret pointed us to research and studies to support its claim that the HPV vaccine caused injury in its girls. We followed the trail. One scientist it linked us to was Dr. Sinhan Lee, a lab pathologist attached to a hospital in Connecticut. Though he retains medical privileges there, in 2010 the hospital terminated his employment for willful misconduct, potentially detrimental to patient care. In 2011, he tried to sell discredited HPV DNA tests with SaneVax, which campaigns against the vaccine. He recommends green tea in the fight against cancer. Handily, he sells that too. Anna Cannon also referred us to the work of another controversial doctor, Yehuda Schoenfeld.
Professor Schoenfeld, you know, Israeli doctor, would be very concerned about the autonomic system and the immune response, you know.
He too acts for anti-vaccine lawsuits.
I was called by lawyers to defend or to support some claims for vaccine-induced autoimmune diseases. And I saw it as a challenge.
Earlier this year, a medical journal withdrew a paper by him and other anti-vaccine academics due to serious concerns regarding its scientific soundness. The paper was funded by the USA-based Dwoskin Foundation. It funds get-togethers for leading anti-vaccine figures, and an anti-vaccine institute on whose scientific board Dr. Schoenfeld sits. We asked Regret to refer us to Irish doctors they claimed shared their HPV vaccine concerns.
Well, one Irish GP would be Dr. Neville Wilson, who had written quite extensively in his blog in relation to these issues.
Dr. Wilson declined to be interviewed. He said media reports of his connections with the group supporting the girls were entirely false. None of the girls are registered patients of his, though he has seen 3 or 4 of them for tests after acute onset of fatigue following vaccination, as reported by their parents, he said. Dr. Wilson pointed us to the work of the discredited Dr. Lee. He also referred us to his own blog. On it, Dr. Wilson cites material from SaneVax and Physicians for Life, a Christian network based in Alabama, USA, that believes that girls should abstain from sex outside marriage instead of getting the vaccine. Regret also referred us to Dr. Andrew Rinn, also based in Kildare. He told us he has never examined the girls.
My position has changed a little bit. I did think that it was doing a lot of damage, and I still think that probably is doing some damage, but there have been huge studies, like on a couple of million people who've had the vaccine, as distinct from a couple of million cohorts who didn't have the vaccine, and there seems to be very little difference in the amount of illness among those two groups.
Dr. Rinn told us he believes the jury is still out on the vaccine.
Some of them, it may have just been a coincidence between the time they got the vaccine and the time they became sick. But nonetheless, when you get huge figures like 300, you have to be suspicious that at least some of these young women became sick, chronically ill, because of the vaccine.
But are there 300 to 400 girls still chronically ill from this vaccine? A month ago, we asked Regret to show us an anonymised version of its database with identifying details removed. Yesterday, in a Facebook statement, it said it would only provide information to a properly appointed person as part of an independent assessment of the girls. And it said its figure of 400 girls is by now a conservative estimate. For this report, we interviewed Peter and Yvonne Hollidge, the parents of Rebecca, whose intervention at that public meeting has now been seen by over 1 million people, and Anna Cannon, the spokesperson for Regret. Days after the interviews, solicitors for both parties wrote to us, stating that under no circumstances should the interviews be broadcast. The Hollidges also withdrew permission for Primetime to make any reference to any aspect of their daughter's medical records. We asked Ms. Cannon, Regret's spokesperson, several questions at interview for which we were awaiting a full response. We wrote again last week with follow-on questions. We've had no reply. The Hollidges remain convinced that the vaccine caused their daughter's ills. They, Miss Cannon and Regret, have refused to take up a HSE offer of a care pathway plan to assess and monitor the girls. They say it would dilute the girls under an existing plan for chronic fatigue and ME cases. They seek an exclusive investigation of the girls based on them having post-Gardasil symptoms and including what they call international experts familiar with treating post-Gardasil symptoms.
The concerned parents' daughters have a large variety of symptoms and don't fall into any one particular syndrome or any one particular diagnosis. That is why it is most appropriate that they are referred to the clinical physician who will look after the symptoms that those girls have.
But what's the problem with the HSE actually investigating them as a bunch, as a group?
Any girl or boy who has any long-term condition should be investigated by the appropriate medical consultant. And all the information that we have on relation to girls who have been vaccinated, who have conditions that have occurred after vaccination, that have been investigated by our colleagues in the Health Products Regulatory Authority, has shown that there has been no link between the vaccine and that condition.
Do you trust the HSE?
No.
Peter Hollidge was part of a Regret delegation that met with the HSE. They were shown a care plan for the girls.
They said, "Is this appropriate? Have you any comments?" Our comments were, it is not appropriate. If the HSE came to us with an appropriate care plan that recognised that this link could actually exist and tried to investigate the root cause of these illnesses, then of course I would open with open arms.
Take-up of the vaccine in Denmark has fallen even more sharply, affected by adverse publicity and campaigning, but also by concerns from some in the medical community, most notably the Nordic Cochrane Centre here in Copenhagen. It has criticised a European Medicines Agency review of a possible link between the vaccine and certain fatigue and ME-related syndromes.
If this is being abused by anti-vaccine groups, that's their fault. It isn't mine. I have not said anything about this vaccine, whether it's good or bad. Nothing.
The chief concern of the Nordic Cochrane Centre is about transparency and process in the European Medicines Agency review. It's not about the safety of the vaccine itself. The European Medicines Agency in London, however, says even when it cast its net very wide, a link to the vaccine was not there.
In all the scenario, all the possible outcomes have not revealed anything more than it would be expected under normal conditions.
Last month, Nordic Cochrane was forced to apologise when it admitted it got it wrong on allegations that the review was compromised by conflicts of interest. In one claim it got the wrong person, and in another it was simply wrong. It's doubled down in a follow-on complaint to the European Ombudsman Emily O'Reilly, chiefly about transparency. It accuses Dr. Altieri of having worked for the HPV vaccine manufacturer Merck until 2012. Wrong again.
Merck KGaA is a German company that has absolutely no relationship at all with Merck & Co., which is the American, what is called the American Merck. The two companies parted 100 years ago or something like that.
Both the Irish and European medical authorities insist they recognise that ill-defined and poorly understood fatigue and immune-related syndromes affect a small number of teenage girls. However, they say that that does not mean that those conditions are linked to a vaccine that is given in and around the same time. We couldn't find any evidence to validate the parents' concerns.
When parents are choosing whether to get the vaccine for their daughters, we would ask them to think about where they are getting the source of their information.
When it comes to the HPV vaccine safety, the biggest trial is with the 200 million people worldwide who have so far been injected with it. The signs are good.
All the national and international bodies all say this vaccine is safe and the benefits far outweigh any short-term risks.
Mass population studies show the vaccine is at least 90% effective in preventing the most common HPV virus strains, genital warts and precancerous lesions of the cervix. You can't have cervical cancer without first having those lesions. In Ireland, 6,500 women get them every year.
Okay, Claire.
300 women a year here get cervical cancer. Between 90 and 100 a year die from it. And living with it is not easy. Surgery almost always results in loss of fertility. Complications with radical hysterectomy can include long-term bowel and bladder problems and sexual dysfunction. Those deemed not suitable for surgery undergo chemoradiation with severe side effects.
Unfortunately, I see on a weekly basis, I see 2 or 3 patients whose lives have been ruined by cervical cancer. I see their families and I see how they've to go on this horrible pathway through what is a hugely, sometimes aggressive, destructive treatment pathway, whereby they feel that their femininity has been destroyed.
Now, from Australia, where it was first introduced, there is confirmation emerging that the HPV vaccine not only prevents precancers, but can prevent full-blown cervical cancer as well.
Their programme has been running since 2007, and what they have shown is that there has been an up to 75% reduction in these precancers, which you must have to develop cancer, and also a 50% decrease in cancer. So we know the vaccine works, but we need to have high uptakes to see that benefit here.
At the European Medicines Agency, the regulator is troubled that parents might be making the wrong choice.
In a low and middle income country, people would absolutely wish they had such an effective intervention to prevent cancer, and we have the luxury of having it, the tremendous public health benefit of having it, and so lightly dismissing it, I think is simply sad. And as a physician and as a mother, I'm really saddened by this.